I'm really looking forward to sharing with you this interview that I just did with Daniel Santos from the Portland Chamber of Commerce. It was one of the most fun and interesting interviews I've done ever. Actually, I was going to say in years. He had some great insights around networking, around really having a value provider attitude as an employee. And I see that as one of the most important qualities and practices to help you have what I think of as employability insurance to increase the odds that you'll always have a good job, having that attitude of how can I provide value. He also has a really fascinating career journey story in terms of overcoming challenges and creating opportunities. So great interview. I think you'll find it really instructional and inspirational. But before we get to Daniel, I just want to share with you the story of how we got connected because it's a great example of um, the power of LinkedIn, and I guess um, more specifically, using LinkedIn as a way to connect with people that you find interesting, whether you're involved in a job search or not. So here's what happened. I had seen a post by Daniel, somebody I was connected to, must have been in his network, and I thought the post was interesting, but what was especially interesting to me was his tagline at the time, which said something about, I love networking. And since so many people don't love networking, and especially a lot of my younger clients, career coaching clients, I find are, very nervous about it and think and have a bad perception of networking. And, for understandable reasons, a lot of people adopt kind of a how can you help me users mentality when networking. And so when I talk with people about the importance of it, they sort of default to that and like, oh, I don't want to be that person. So anyway, I reached out to Daniel and said how intrigued I was by his tagline. And I wondered if we could have a conversation because I explained the reasoning that I just shared with you in terms of so many of my clients uh, are reluctant to do so. We had a fantastic conversation, very useful info. So I asked him if I could shoot a short video of his approach to networking, which I did. And this was, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, maybe four. So recently, when I decided to start a podcast, he was one of my top people that I reached out to, and he graciously agreed to. So you'll hear, so that's how we met. And again, you'll hear him give some great practical suggestions, as well as I think you'll find his story really inspiring. So here's Daniel Santos. All right. So again, thanks so much for being willing to do this. I'm really looking forward to it. So how about to sort of frame your career journey, your life adventure, if you could just say a little bit about what you're doing now, and then we'll launch into your origin story.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me on here. I always love your LinkedIn posts, the stories and everything that it generates. All your content that I've seen recently has been awesome, and I've actually digested a ton of it. So thank you for having me on here in general. So my current role is with the Chamber of Commerce here in the Portland area. I'm the Director of Growth and Innovation, and as well as the Board President of the Maine Children's Home. So those are my two big roles currently that are taking most of my time.
Cool. And can you just say a little bit about what your work with the chamber involves, and then we'll do your origin story.
Yeah, so my work at the chamber kind of involves me taking a look around the place. And then when I see a thing that where I'm like, can we do this better? Trying to tackle that in the most logical, fast, and efficient way. Because here at the chamber, things kind of move or evolve at a slow pace, and there's lots of opportunities for improvement. So I look at technologies, different ways to improve our internal systems, automate stuff. I also work with marketing. How can we get a bigger audience using things like SEO, digital analytics? How can we improve the friction it takes to join by incorporating new software, that kind of stuff. So I take a look at the business as like a holistic thing, try to find as many opportunities to improve the current systems that we have.
Cool. And what was your first, I can't remember, what was your first role when you got hired?
So I got hired here as the membership development manager, which means I was the sales guy. So I was responsible for the growth of the chamber in regards to new business acquisition, where now I'm responsible for growth in as many fields as I can put my hands in.
Wow. And what did you do that made them say like, wow, we need to access more of this guy's skills? Like, how did that recognition happen?
It definitely happened over time, but as a person who's never been one to just do my role, like I guess in the sense, I'm just always just, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way kind of guy. I've always taken the opportunity to, even within the first few weeks, express things that I'd like to be done or differently or better or improve upon. I had a kind of a unique opportunity to do that. Typically in my role as a membership development manager, I used to be supported for a long time by an admin. When I was getting there, the admin had been one of the longer running employees. She was the backbone of the chamber in a lot of ways. She knew everything, the ins and outs. She managed the database. She did all the arrears calling. She could see anything that was wrong, and she was on top of those phone calls every day. And she was just an incredible person, but she was retiring. And I was no longer going to have that support given to me anymore. So right off the bat, I realized that I was going to be doing the job of the person who was in the previous role before me, as well as a lot more stuff. And with that said, I just kind of put my feet to the ground and figured out ways to improve efficiencies. And the way I started doing that was I created our first online join form, connected it to our database, which automated a ton of stuff right off the beginning. I then made it so that we could create quotes for members, so that way she didn't have to create the quote or fill out that stuff. It was a little bit more efficient and organic. But I tried to basically automate as much of her position as I could. And within a few months, I had a lot of those core things finished. Now, obviously, the individual touches and all the love that that person put in was never going to be replicated by automation. But what it did allow me to do was perform at my role and do someone else's role in a very short period of time. And so that kind of got me inspired to always tackle more projects at the chamber. The chamber is a very small nonprofit. And so everyone wears many hats, which gives me the opportunity to just offer my help in any way. And I'm a very big generalist with a wide range of knowledge. And so I was able to offer help almost all the time. And so I just started getting pulled into meetings with the board of directors, pulled into different meetings quite a bit. And it just seemed like that would continue on forever. And then I got really lucky right before COVID. I started coming up with this idea for the Director of Growth and Innovation about 3 years ago. And I started really pitching it to the chamber as an opportunity for a need that I saw. We did stuff in a lot of ways that were the way that we always did it. And I hate the words, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Because I just like, it can be better though, right? It can be better. And so I really wanted to start a process to make it so that way during that period of time, we can start operating a little bit more remotely, a little bit more flexibly, and streamline our onboarding process, especially with our members, so that they didn't have to come into the chamber. We could meet our members a little bit more where they were at. And I started doing this right about August before COVID hit. And so I had been pushing really hard as the membership development manager. We've got to do this. We have to do this. I can see the value in this. And that's hard. You're a person who's not in a leadership position per se. I'm not the CEO. I'm not the VP or anything like that. I'm just a person who says that we need to take on extra work now because I think it'll make us more efficient in the future. And the work I wanted to bring on was technologies, which is not always the easiest adopted. There's a lot of people who are resistant to change, especially with technology. And those were all things that I ran into with my proposals. But I got people slowly around to the idea of being able to start operating a little bit more remotely. And what that did is come March that year, day one, when every other business shut their doors, Chamber was still open. Most of the COVID news and most of the COVID information, especially from the business community in this region, had to come from somewhere. And we were the vessel for that information because we didn't have to close our doors, not 1 second. And then instantly I knew that we weren't going to be able to do our events in the same way. And I understood the importance of getting the event information out during this period of time. And so I was like, we need to bring out a virtual events program. So I created that from the ground up myself, produced the virtual events in the very beginning. Our first event that we did virtually was our Eggs and Issues, which is still our largest Eggs and Issues that we've had, with over 1,000 in attendance for that one. It was over COVID information, so it's pertinent that everyone be there. But yeah, and so different things like that, I think, slowly got them around to the idea that, you know, he's on to something. He sees a vision of things that should be done, and he goes, puts in the effort, gets it done. And so, and then they were able to see how much more efficient we were. So once everything was completed and we got there, we were able to see how efficient we were. And then I started taking over admin of most of our systems and a bunch of other stuff as the membership development manager. I basically was doing what I'm doing now as the membership development manager. So eventually, after pitching it enough times, I got my role.
Very cool. And man, what a great example of somebody who provides value. Like from day one, you're looking for ways of providing value. And also, what a great example. You said just like a minute or two ago about they could see you, somebody with a vision, somebody who has a vision and can also execute. Like oftentimes those don't go hand in hand. So very, very
I've always viewed myself kind of like a team captain, where I have no problem getting a whole team around something and taking the individual parts, the individual ingredients of the team and making the perfect tiramisu, for lack of better words. And I've always found a huge passion for that. And I also love building new things, like being the first person to go figure it out. Like I want to be the inventor and tinker in the very beginning, and then bring a product that is decent enough to work forward. But I'm not going to lie. After that, I love delegating that stuff away.
You got it. Neat. Well, great. Set the stage for like, we've heard sort of like spoiler alert how the story ends, at least currently, you know?
Yeah.
So doing great work. So yeah, let's talk about your journey. And you know, as you know, in our emails, you talked about the theme of chaos is an important one. So if you want to start us off from the very beginning.
Yeah. I guess I'll start high level with what I mean. Chaos is just knowing basically nothing. It's having no idea of what's going on, nowhere to move, and it seems chaotic. As soon as you know something, it's not chaos anymore. You have like a little bit of a strategy you could pull onto. People are very, very scared of chaos. Most people are, what I would say, neophobic. They're not really interested in diving into new things, especially if they're not going to be the best at it, or if they don't have like a basis or an understanding. I have no problem jumping into new things, because I honestly believe that's how I was brought into this world, was more like, here you go, surprise. And I have seen what it takes to embrace chaos. And I've seen what happens when you don't embrace chaos properly. And I've had that from my family, from my mother. And so knowing that, one, when you embrace chaos the right way, it builds an incredible resilience in you that is, you know, strong foundation that's unshakable. And two, that is the thing that provides the value. Once you start embracing chaos, whenever chaotic situations come aboard, your body gets excited. You're like, I want to go into that, right? Where most people would be like, no, when I feel that resistance of chaos, I want to dive in. And I think that's given me a leg up on a lot of people, even if I don't know a subject at all, coming in completely raw of stuff. That doesn't matter to me, because I know I can go pick up a book and figure it out. I know I can find an answer somewhere. If I can't find an answer, I know I can find someone who has an answer that'd be willing to share something with me. And so that's kind of what I've said about embracing chaos. It's as soon as you lean into it, and as soon as you understand how to do it the right way, so you don't obliterate yourself, you will find that it becomes kind of your vehicle for growth. Chaos is the resistance you feel. And when you press back against chaos, the muscle you build is growth.
I love it. And now what a great example of the growth mindset. Good old Carol Dweck's growth versus fix. Yeah. I remember when we first talked, you back to improving processes, et cetera. You worked like was it like a cell phone
Yeah.
company and did something amazing with their sales system?
Yeah. So it wasn't their sales system. I unfortunately signed a non-disclosure agreement not too long ago, but I can talk in generalities, which is
Okay.
great. So for one of the larger cell phone organizations in the United States, when I was in the New England area as a recent sales manager, we had just adopted this insane new billing process, a new billing program, new systems for processing sales. It's our new POS system. But it was a very new rollout from a very antiquated system. And the new rollout was a nightmare. It was catastrophic. Nothing was working right. There was just tons and tons of problems. And because of the new software, we also had a new sales training program. And that sales training program was extensive. It was just much longer than the previous program was because it took a lot longer to acquire the information to be proficient to work out on the floor. And as a sales manager who desperately needed sales reps and turned out fast, I disliked the current product that we were using. We were asked in the leadership meeting, I went through a group, I went through the group of people who were interested in leadership, and we were asked, like, what's one thing you would change? And I out loud said that thing, and they're like, well, go ahead and change it. So we got a group together of about 4 of us, and I had just got done reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, and I really love the idea of streamlining and finding that Pareto's principle, that 80-20, making sure that we can get people mostly to proficient in a fast way, because right now we're getting people through a long process and they're not proficient on the floor. I would say that they were coming out of this process being about 50% proficient. And when they were there, they were good with the system, but really not the best at the sales process, which in my mind was backwards. We were spending so much time teaching this process of the system, but systems change. Obviously, we just changed this system. What's to say that this isn't going to change again? And so for me, the foundations to be good at this role was more focused on your ability to interact with the customer and provide a great experience, less on the systems. So what I did is I took a look at the systems and all the trainings that we did for that program, and I cut, rearranged, sliced, diced, and I took their exact framework and pieced in the pieces to something that was new and different. And I essentially put the sales process first, the systems process second. I took off a lot of the system stuff that wasn't necessary for a person on the floor within 2 weeks to understand. And what it ended up doing with my slicing and dicing and cutting was it took our 8-week program and made it about a 4-week program. And this was an idea from, like I said, at the time, I was either a manager or a sales rep. I could have just been a sales rep at this time. And when I brought that to my leadership, which was our area sales manager, they were basically like, try it out. Like, if you can bring it to a market and it works with someone that you can do, we'll bring this elsewhere. And they're like, so let's test this out. You hire a person, put them through that program, and we'll see what happens. So I had a friend who worked in the culinary industry, and he was a cook, and he worked the craziest hours, had no benefits, and he was back at house. He was just getting treated poorly. He was a good friend of mine from high school, and he's an extremely talented musician. And I knew the reason why he did that is because it gave him like a lot of flexibility. But I told him that I would hire him as a part-time rep, give him all the same flexibility, bigger pay, benefits, if he would allow me to be my experiment, essentially. And he said, no problem, literally left his job and trusted me to come to my organization. And we had him go through that sales training program. And within 4 weeks, without a doubt, he was more proficient than most other reps after that 8-week program. And because of that, my area sales manager and my director of sales was like, hold on, this might work. So with the other reps, the other people that were helping me with this project, we rolled this out next to the largest store in our footprint, but definitely one of the largest stores in our market as well. And we gave it to them to roll out to 2 new sales managers who weren't me. So we're going to give all the materials that I produced and see if anyone can repeat what I've produced without me having to guide them along the way. Like, did I make something that was able to be reproduced? And so they took the sales training program. They brought it back to their 2 reps. And within 4 weeks, their reps were proficient. And within a few months, they were leading the other reps, right? They were just more comfortable with the systems because we all had gone through new systems, but they were extremely comfortable with the systems. They were selling phones. They was taking a lot less interactions with the managers. And so I had gotten lucky where the director of sales, which I'm sure the national company didn't really appreciate at the time, was like, we're going to do this. He's like, we're doing this. This is something we're going to bring into our market. And so we started doing it in New England. It became the default onboarding program for new leaders for a bit in New England. And at the same time, my store was closing. So we were shutting down my store and I was no longer going to have a job essentially. And they instead really loved the work that I did and gave me the opportunity to kind of create my own role. I worked as an interim business development manager in that period of time. But after about 3 months, one of our locations in the Midwest got downsized like crazy. There was a huge amount of layoffs and firings for just myriads of different reasons and dysfunction in that area, a lot of fraud, different stuff like that. And they needed to rebuild the whole territory. Well, if they were going to do that with the current training program, it was going to take about 8 weeks and there was going to be a lot of trouble. But when in the big national meeting, when they were explaining the troubles, my director of sales was like, I've got a guy that can bring, get 20 reps onboarded very fast with this training program. So they allowed me to go to the Midwest, onboard reps, bring my training program out there, help out. And so that was like another way I had the opportunity to kind of create my own role, innovate in an organization, and provide value as best I could. Eventually, parts of our program, the national training team wasn't very fond of us having a different training team, which makes total sense for legal reasons and a myriad of reasons. And I think initially they were a little bit upset and confrontational. But when we had a conversation, I think when I explained some of the changes, it seemed to make a lot of sense. And shortly after I left the organization, I had been informed that a lot of the processes and the things that I implemented were actually adopted nationally shortly after. Although that we had to eventually start winding down the training program that Dan helped come up with.
That's neat. So, man, talk about a like track record of making things work better. That's awesome. And did you go from that to the chamber job, or was there something in between?
There was something in between. So I went to Cintas, which was an outside sales executive there for a bit, doing facility sales, which was kind of cool. I actually was hired as a sales support rep, which is like a delivery driver and sales guy. But I knew I actually wanted to be a sales guy. They didn't approve me when I sent in my application to be a sales guy. So I applied as an SSR. And the whole time I told them my only intentions was to be a salesperson. And they kept implying. I did like 4 interviews and each person was like, well, you're in the wrong role. And I was like, that's fine. I'll still do this role. My intentions are to be this person. Eventually I got to the general manager. The general manager was like, well, would you like to try sales? And so then they flew me out to New York. I met the VP. The VP loved me, happened to be a huge wrestler as well. And so I got the job at sales there for a bit. And that was in that role for about 1.5 years. And it was a role where I quickly learned that I was just being too much of a taker in a lot of ways. And it wasn't the most comfortable for me. And it kind of wore me down because I couldn't figure out that way to do stuff the way I'd always done, which is by providing a ton of value up front and then ask. And then when it makes sense for them have no question of who to ask for that service. You know what I mean? So I started winding down my love and my passion for doing that. And at the exact same time, it was like the most serendipitous thing. I get a phone call, and on the other side of the line, it's Tommy Johnson. And he goes, I've been asking everyone in the area for a sales guy, and your name just keeps coming up. He goes, would you be interested in coming to work at the chamber? And I was like, absolutely, let's take a look at it. And so at the time they opened up my role, he reached out to me to apply. I applied, and the rest is history.